Hello, welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Yinko Itade. Here are the news making headlines across the continent. At least 117 people killed and many more still missing after heavy flooding swept through Niger State in Nigeria. The city of Mokwa particularly hard hit. An estimated 3,000 homes have been washed away there. Rwanda is seeing an economic rise, but the UN is warning that the East African country is leaving too many behind. With 41% of its GDP coming from Kigali alone, poverty in rural areas remains high. Mauritania's Sidi Ould Tah named president of the African Development Bank, winning 76% of the vote. He'll take over in September as the bank faces looming funding cuts from key partners like the US. Thanks for joining us. Let's start in Niger State in north-central Nigeria, where at least 117 people have been killed after heavy flooding swept through the area. Rescue teams are scrambling to find residents that are still missing. They say they are expecting to recover more bodies. In the city of Mokwa, torrential rain washed away dozens of homes. Authorities are estimating that some 3,000 houses have been submerged. Clemence Walla reports.
Children play in puddles as first responders continue to search for the missing after Wednesday's flash floods tore through the central Nigerian city of Mokwa. The water submerged and swept away dozens of homes, leaving rubble and devastation in its wake. According to local authorities, scores of people have been killed, with a death toll expected to rise.
We deploy our men to the scene. I was also coordinating the search and rescue operation, and as I'm speaking to you, it is ongoing. Dead recovery is still ongoing.
Survivors try to salvage what they can, but many have lost everything.
My children asked me to come and salvage some clothes and sleeping mats to wash. I thank God the flood did not drown any of the children. We managed to evacuate. I can't locate my home because of the destruction.
I lost something too much. I didn't lose any family. So we need help the government to help us because we didn't have anywhere to go now.
Nigeria often experiences flooding during the 6-month-long rainy season, which wreaks havoc every year. However, the floods are exacerbated by inadequate drainage, the construction of homes on waterways, and the dumping of waste in drains and water channels. The country is also haunted by last year's natural disaster, which killed over 1,200 people and displaced 1.2 million others in one of the worst floods in decades.
Next, Rwanda is seen as something of an economic success story, but the UN is warning today that the country needs to spread its wealth more fairly. Despite rapid growth, millions still live in poverty, especially in rural areas. According to government figures, much of Kenya's success is concentrated in the capital, Kigali, which alone contributes 41% of the country's GDP. As the economy shifts towards services, many are being left behind. Our correspondent in Kigali, Juliette Montilli, has the story.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty began his press conference by acknowledging Rwanda's progress. Between 2017 and 2024, 1.5 million people were lifted out of poverty, driven by what's been described as miraculous economic growth. But there is still a long road ahead. Poverty is still a daily reality for 27% of Rwandans. That's around 3.6 million people. According to the UN experts, the benefits of growth are not being shared equally, particularly between residents of rural areas and urban elites.
The message I gave to Prime Minister Edward Ngirente is very clear. Now is not the time to cut investments in healthcare, education, or social protection. On the contrary, this is precisely the time to invest in these sectors and to offset the withdrawal of international donors. Because it is only by having a skilled workforce, by building what we call human capital, that the country's long-term prosperity can continue to improve.
voir s'améliorer encore la prospérité du pays.
These challenges come at a difficult time for Rwanda. Public debt now stands at nearly 80% of GDP. That forced the government to tighten budgets in key areas like social protection, just as some international donors are scaling back their support.
Going to take a closer look at Sidi Ould Tah now. He's been named president of the African Development Bank. The former finance minister from Mauritania secured the top job after gaining 76% of a vote held during the institution's annual meeting in Ivory Coast. Tah will succeed Nigerian economist Akinwumi Adesina, who's been at the helm for a decade. He completed 2 terms as president and is scheduled to step down in September. Tah's election does come at a challenging time as Africa's leading financial institution faces potential funding cuts from the US. We're going to talk more about this with Lennox Yi-Eke, who is a finance and business journalist at African Business. He joins us from Abidjan. Lennox, thanks so much for joining us on the program. So Sidi Ould Tah has he has 4 decades of experience in African and international finance. What do you see him bringing to the role?
Great. So Sidi campaigned on a platform of transformation. He said that he's keen to reform Africa's financial architecture to turn the continent's demographic boom into potential, which is basically create jobs. Maybe talking first about the architecture, he said he's keen to help the AFDB move with speed and agility. So that is re-engineering internal processes to ensure that approvals, disbursements happen much faster. He also mentioned that he's keen to see the AFDB partner more closely with other African financial institutions and tap into domestic capital. So our pension funds, our insurance capital, and our sovereign wealth funds. So essentially helping African develop with its own capital. So those, I think, are some of the priorities, just going by what he campaigned on. But I mean, we'll have to wait to see what he will be talking about in the coming weeks and months as he sets his agenda for his presidency.
Yeah, one of the things he might have to navigate is this threat of the US cutting its funding to the AFDB. The cut would be up to $555 million. How do you think he will look to navigate that with the bank?
I think, yeah, that's a substantial cut. Some analysts suggest that his close ties with the Gulf could help offset some of this. But again, this has to be wait and see again, because one is tighter and the Arab world won't be waiting with an open check. I think innovations and new models of partnering are key. Investors will have to see a return as well as development impact. So he has to really work hard to kind of offset the impact of US cuts and the general funding constraints facing development finance at the moment.
Yeah, there are several challenges, it looks like, that the bank will be facing, not just that funding cut from the US. Talk to us about some of the other issues it's grappling with at the moment.
Yeah, so I think one of the major issues for now is boosting Africa's self-reliance and transitioning from a model of aid to investment, so building markets, growing income, so that we have a virtuous cycle of spending with our consumers and with our businesses. So I think those are the main priorities, but of course, climate change remains a major challenge. Infrastructure with energy, closing the energy access gap. The bank partnered with the World Bank Group in earlier this year for Mission 300. So those are some of the things I think that he needs to also pay close attention to as he prepares to assume office in September later this year.
And of course, Tah is taking over from Akinwumi Adesina. The bank has grown dramatically during his tenure. Talk to us about his legacy.
Yeah, I think Adesina leaves a truly amazing legacy in terms of what he's been able to achieve. The capital of the bank, of course, has grown from $93 billion from when he joined to $318 billion. So that's substantial. And of course, also over the past 10 years, around $102 billion has been deployed in Africa under his tenure. And the amazing thing is that this is actually 46% of the total financing of the bank since establishment. So there's been real momentum behind him. As he leaves, I think also people will remember him for his personality. He is a charismatic gentleman, and they'll also remember for the fact that he put people first in terms of the priorities of the bank. So he talked about 128 million people having access to health services, 121 million people having access to transport, and many millions more having access to services that many in the developed world would take for granted, but that make a real difference in the lives of people in Africa.
Lennox, thank you so much for joining us on the program. Great to get your insights on this. Thank you. Next, French Minister Delegate Tahini Mohamed Swahi is in Mayot today following a trip to Nairobi alongside the Kenyan Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. This visit builds on a trade agreement signed last November between Kenya and Mayot, a French overseas territory in the Indian Ocean. The pact aims to strengthen economic ties and streamline trade, potentially opening up new markets for Kenyan businesses. Oliver Bizo, who followed the convoy from Nairobi to Mayot, tells us more.
This is a historic visit. It's the first time Mayot has ever welcomed a foreign minister-level official. Kenya's Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Korir Sing'oei, arrived this Friday afternoon alongside France's Tahini Mohamed Swahi, who was born here. Their day began in Nairobi, and then after a 2.5-hour flight to Mayot, they boarded a smaller aircraft to tour the island's stunning landscapes and highlight its tourism potential. They were then given a traditional local welcome, followed by a series of visits, including to a data centre, and numerous speeches throughout the afternoon.
And I want to thank, in a very special way, the government of France for facilitating this cooperation that has enabled us as Kenya to build and to forge a new friendship with these great people of this beautiful island called Mayot.
Nous allons voir comment améliorer cette desserte aérienne entre Kenya.
We will look at how to improve the air connections between Kenya and Mayot, how to strengthen them and ensure that the people of Mayot who wish to travel to Africa, mainland France, or anywhere else in the world can do so under the best possible conditions.
En France métropolitaine ou partout dans le monde, eh bien, puissent le faire dans les meilleures conditions possibles.
This visit follows an agreement signed last November in Nairobi to strengthen trade between Kenya and Mayot, especially in sectors like agriculture, digital technology, tourism, and the blue economy. It's a win-win deal. Mayot will benefit from this cooperation, especially in its post-cyclone reconstruction, while Kenya will not only gain better access to French markets, but European ones as well.
Well, that's it from all of us on the Eye on Africa team. Thanks so much for your company and stay tuned. There's plenty more news up to come.